November 7, 1963, Kennedy Airport, 11:47 p.m. A private plane sat on the tarmac, engines running. Inside, a man named Frank the banker Romano sat with two suitcases beside him. Each suitcase contained $15 million in cash, $30 million total, money that didn't belong to him. Frank was sweating, not from the heat, from fear. 72 hours earlier, Frank had been the richest independent operator in New York. He controlled the docks, the trucking unions, the construction rackets. He was untouchable. Then Bumpy Johnson paid him a visit, spoke 6 words. Leave now, or leave in pieces. Frank chose to leave, and he was never seen again. This is the story of how one warning from Bumpy Johnson made the biggest gangster in New York vanish with $30 million forever. To understand what happened, you need to understand who Frank Romano was in 1963. Frank wasn't mafia. That was important. He was Italian, but he'd never been made, never took the oath, never bowed to the 5 families. Instead, Frank built his own empire. Started as a longshoreman in Brooklyn in 1945, worked his way up, became a union organizer, then a union boss. By 1955, he controlled the longshoremen's union at the Brooklyn docks. That's where the real money was. Every ship that came into Brooklyn paid Frank. Every container that moved through the docks paid Frank. Every trucking company that wanted to haul cargo paid Frank. Frank wasn't violent like other gangsters. He was smart, a numbers guy, an organizer. That's why they called him the banker. By 1963, Frank was pulling in $20 million a year. He lived in a mansion in Long Island, drove a Rolls-Royce, had politicians on his payroll, had judges in his pocket. Frank thought he was untouchable. He thought nobody could touch him. He was wrong. The problem started in October 1963. Frank decided to expand. He'd been watching Harlem for years, saw the money flowing through the numbers racket, saw the potential, and Frank saw an opportunity. Bumpy Johnson had just gotten out of Alcatraz in June. He was older now, 58. Maybe he was slowing down. Maybe he'd lost his edge. Frank thought he could move in. Not with violence, with money. Frank's plan was simple. He'd approach the numbers operators in Harlem, offer them better terms than Bumpy, more protection, better payouts, legitimate banking services. Frank figured if he could flip enough operators, Bumpy would have to negotiate. And once Bumpy negotiated, Frank would own him. It was a good plan. On paper. October 28, 1963. Frank sent his representatives to Harlem, 3 men, well-dressed, professional. They carried briefcases full of cash and contracts. They started with the smaller operators, the ones who might be tempted. They made their pitch, better terms, more money, protection from the Italians. All they had to do was switch from Bumpy's operation to Frank's. Some operators listened, a few even seemed interested, but none of them said yes. Because everyone in Harlem knew one rule: you don't go against Bumpy Johnson, not if you want to keep breathing. Frank's representatives reported back. The operators were scared of Bumpy. They wouldn't move without guarantees. Frank decided to make a bolder move. He'd approach Bumpy directly, man to man, businessman to businessman, make an offer Bumpy couldn't refuse. That was Frank's second mistake. His first was coming to Harlem. His second was thinking Bumpy would negotiate. November 4, 1963. Frank drove to Harlem himself. He brought 2 bodyguards, both armed, both experienced. But Frank wasn't planning violence. This was a business meeting. Frank went to Small's Paradise, Bumpy's headquarters. Walked in at 3 p.m. The restaurant was quiet. Afternoon lull. A few old men playing chess, a bartender wiping glasses. And Bumpy Johnson sitting at his corner table, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. Frank walked over. His bodyguard stayed by the door. "Mr. Johnson," Frank said, "my name is Frank Romano. I'd like to talk business." Bumpy looked up slowly, took off his reading glasses, studied Frank for a long moment. "I know who you are," Bumpy said quietly. "The banker, Brooklyn docks, union boss." Frank smiled. "Then you know I'm a serious man, a man who understands money." "Sit," Bumpy said. Frank sat, pulled out a folder from his briefcase, laid it on the table. Mr. Johnson, I'm here to make you an offer. A partnership. I bring capital, banking services, political connections. You keep your operation, your respect, your position. We split the profits. 60-40. 60 for you? Bumpy asked. 60 for you, Frank said. I'm not greedy. I just want in. Bumpy was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed the folder back across the table without opening it. No. Frank's smile faded. Mr. Johnson, I think you misunderstand. This is a generous offer. I'm offering you stability, protection. I don't need your protection, Bumpy interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but something in his eyes made Frank's bodyguards tense. And I don't need your money. Everyone needs money, Frank said. Not everyone, Bumpy replied. Some people need respect more, and you just disrespected me by coming into my neighborhood and thinking you could buy me like a politician. Frank's jaw tightened. I'm trying to do this the right way, the business way. The business way, Bumpy repeated. You mean the way you bought the dock unions? The way you bought the trucking companies? The way you think you can buy Harlem? I never said. You didn't have to. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. Let me explain something to you, Frank. You're good with numbers, with contracts, with organization, but you don't understand what Harlem is. I understand it's profitable, Frank said. Profitable, Bumpy said. Yes, but it's also a community, my community. And you think you can walk in here with cash and contracts and take it from me? I'm not taking anything. I'm offering partnership. Bumpy smiled, not a friendly smile. You already sent your people here 2 weeks ago, tried to flip my operators, offered them better terms, tried to go around me. Frank went still. He hadn't known Bumpy knew about that. So let me make this clear, Bumpy continued. You're not offering partnership, you're trying to take over, and you thought I'd be too old, too slow, too tired to stop you. Mr. Johnson, I'm giving you a warning, Bumpy said. His voice dropped even lower. Leave Harlem alone, go back to Brooklyn, run your docks, count your money, and never come back here. And if I don't? Frank asked. Bumpy looked at him for a long moment. Then you won't be counting anything anymore. Frank stood up. You're making a mistake. I have connections. I have power. You have nothing I want, Bumpy said. And you have 72 hours to decide if you want to keep what you have. Frank left. Angry, humiliated, but not scared. Not yet. He should have been. November 5th, 1963, the next day. Frank went back to Brooklyn, called a meeting with his top people, his union representatives, his enforcers, his financial guys. Bumpy Johnson rejected the offer, Frank said. Threatened me. So we're going to move forward anyway. We'll start pulling operators over. We'll offer triple the money. We'll make it impossible for them to say no. One of his men, a Brooklyn union boss named Sal, spoke up. Frank, maybe we should listen to the warning. Bumpy Johnson isn't someone you want to fight. He's a 60-year-old ex-con, Frank said. I have 100 men, I have the unions, I have the docks. What's he going to do? Sal didn't answer, but he looked worried. Frank spent the next day making calls, reaching out to his political connections, making sure his protection was solid, making sure if Bumpy tried anything, Frank would have the law on his side. But Bumpy didn't use the law. He used something else. November 6, 1963. 2 days after the warning. Frank's lawyer called him at 8 a.m. Frank, we have a problem. The FBI just showed up at my office with a subpoena. They're investigating the union for racketeering. Frank's blood went cold. What? They have documents, financial records, names, dates, they know everything. Frank hung up, called his accountant. Get to the office, we need to move money, now. But when his accountant got to the office, federal agents were already there. They had a warrant. They were seizing records. Frank called his union bosses. One by one, they told him the same thing. The FBI was interviewing everyone, asking questions, showing evidence. In less than 24 hours, Frank's entire operation was under federal investigation. Frank wasn't stupid. He knew what this meant. Someone had dropped a dime. Someone had given the FBI everything they needed, and Frank knew exactly who. November 7, 1963. 3 days after the warning, Frank sat in his Long Island mansion staring at the phone. His lawyer had called again. The FBI had enough to indict him on 15 counts of racketeering, bribery, and extortion. He was looking at 30 years minimum. Frank had two choices. He could fight it, hire expensive lawyers, hope his political connections could make it go away. But that would take years and cost millions, and he might still lose, or he could run. Frank had been preparing for this moment his whole life. He had accounts in the Cayman Islands, had a fake passport, had connections in South America. He just never thought he'd need to use them. At 9 p.m., Frank made his decision. He called his most trusted associate, a man named Tony. "Get me a plane, private, Kennedy Airport, tonight. File a flight plan to Mexico City." "Frank, are you sure?" "Just do it." Frank went to his safe. Inside was $30 million in cash, his emergency fund, money he'd been skimming and saving for years. He loaded it into 2 suitcases, packed a small bag with clothes, didn't say goodbye to his wife, didn't call his kids, just walked out of his mansion and got in his car. At 11:30 p.m., Frank arrived at Kennedy Airport. The private plane was waiting, engines running. As Frank walked toward the plane, a car pulled up, a black Cadillac. Frank's bodyguards reached for their guns. The car door opened. Bumpy Johnson stepped out. Frank froze. Bumpy walked toward him. Slowly. No weapons visible. No one else with him. Just an old man in a fedora and overcoat. "Going somewhere, Frank?" Bumpy asked. Frank's hand moved toward the gun in his jacket. "Stay back." "I'm not here to stop you," Bumpy said. "I'm here to make sure you understand something." "Understand what?" "That if you ever come back, if you ever try to contact anyone in New York, if you ever think about coming back to finish what you started, you won't make it to the plane next time." Frank stared at him. "You did this. The FBI, the investigation, that was you." "I made a phone call," Bumpy said. "Told them where to look, what to find. But Frank, that was all your dirt, your crimes, your greed. I just made sure the right people knew about it. You destroyed my life." "No," Bumpy said. "I gave you a warning. You ignored it. You destroyed your own life." Frank's finger tightened on his gun. He could shoot Bumpy right now. Right here. End this. But Bumpy just stood there. Calm. Waiting. "Go ahead," Bumpy said quietly. "Pull it. But ask yourself, do you really think I'd come here alone? Do you think I'd give you a clean shot without insurance?" Frank looked around. He didn't see anyone, but that didn't mean they weren't there. He lowered his hand. "Smart choice," Bumpy said. "Now get on that plane, take your money, go live somewhere warm, and never think about New York again." Frank picked up his suitcases, walked to the plane, climbed the stairs, never looked back. The plane took off at 11:52 p.m. Destination, Mexico City, then Brazil, then who knows. Frank Romano was never seen in New York again. The FBI searched for him for years. His indictment remained open. His assets were frozen. His empire collapsed. His wife divorced him in absentia. His kids changed their names. His associates either cooperated with the FBI or went to prison. And Frank? Rumors said he was living in Rio, or Buenos Aires, or somewhere in the Caribbean, with $30 million and no way to ever come home. November 8, 1963, the next morning. Bumpy was having breakfast at Wells' restaurant, reading the newspaper. The headline was about Kennedy's upcoming trip to Texas. One of Bumpy's associates sat down. "Frank's gone. Plane left last night. Word is he took $30 million with him." Bumpy sipped his coffee. "Good." "Good? He got away with $30 million. "He got away with his life," Bumpy corrected. "That was the deal. He leaves, he lives. He had 72 hours. He took it." "But the money doesn't matter," Bumpy said. "What matters is the message. Frank Romano tried to take Harlem. I warned him. He ignored me. So I showed him that no amount of money, no amount of power, no amount of connections can protect you if you cross Bumpy Johnson. And now every other gangster in New York knows." "Exactly." Bumpy folded his newspaper. "Frank's running. He'll spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, living in hiding. That's a worse punishment than anything I could have done to him here. The associate nodded. What if he comes back? He won't, Bumpy said. Because Frank's smart enough to know that if he does, he won't be leaving in a plane next time. He'll be leaving in a box. Frank Romano's disappearance became one of New York's greatest mysteries. The FBI never found him. His family never heard from him again. The $30 million was never recovered. Some said he was living like a king in South America. Others said he was dead, killed by someone who wanted that $30 million. But the people who knew the truth, the people in Harlem, the people who understood Bumpy Johnson, they knew exactly what happened. Bumpy Johnson gave a warning. Frank Romano ignored it. And Frank learned that some things are more valuable than money. Like knowing when to walk away. Like understanding that power isn't about how much you have. It's about knowing how to use it. November 7th, 1963. The night Bumpy Johnson made the biggest gangster in New York disappear with $30 million. Not through violence, not through threats, through one simple warning and the wisdom to back it up with action. Frank Romano got to keep his money and his life, but he lost everything else. His empire, his family, his home, his identity, and Bumpy. Bumpy went back to running Harlem, protecting his community, being the man nobody dared to challenge. Because when Bumpy Johnson gives you a warning, you take it, or you disappear.